The doctor's hands were trembling. I remember that more clearly than anything else. She was staring at the paperwork in my file, not at the screen where my baby's tiny heart was fluttering like a trapped bird. Then, without a word, she reached over and switched the monitor off. Just like that, the room went quiet except for the hum of the air conditioning and my own pulse pounding in my ears. "Mrs. Whitaker," she said, her voice so low I had to lean forward to hear it. "I need to talk to you alone. Right now." She led me down the hall to her private office, closed the door, and turned the lock. I thought something was wrong with the baby. My mind raced through every worst-case scenario I'd read about online in the middle of the night. But when she finally looked at me, her eyes were full of something else entirely. Fear and pity. "You need to leave your husband today," she whispered, "before you go home tonight. And you need to call a divorce lawyer first." I laughed. I actually laughed out loud. Because it was so absurd. "What? No, we're having a baby together. We're happy." "I don't understand." She shook her head slowly. "That's exactly why this is going to hurt so much. What I'm about to show you, it's going to change everything you think you know about your marriage." I sat there frozen, waiting for her to tell me it was a mistake, a misunderstanding, anything, but she didn't. She just opened a folder on her desk and slid it toward me. "Let me take you back to the beginning, because you need to understand how I ended up in that office. 4 months pregnant, watching my whole world fall apart piece by piece. My name is Amelia Whitaker. I'm 33 years old. I'm a creative director at a boutique advertising agency here in Boston. And I come from what people around here like to call old money. 5 years ago, my grandmother Charlotte passed away and left me her estate, about $2.8 million in a trust. Plus the Whitaker family home, this beautiful, historic house on the North Shore where generations of Whitaker women have lived, loved, and raised their families. I never made a big deal out of it. I still drive the same 10-year-old Audi I bought before the inheritance. I still get my coffee from the same little shop every morning. The money was security. It wasn't who I was. But it did make me a target. I just didn't realize it yet. And that's how I met Ethan. 4 years ago, at the annual Whitaker Family Charity Gala. It was the same event we'd hosted for decades. Black tie, string quartet, champagne flowing under chandeliers in the old ballroom. I was standing by the bar, trying to escape some guy who'd asked about my trust fund before he even knew my last name. Subtle as a brick. Then Ethan appeared, tall, dark hair, easy smile that made the room feel a little lighter. He asked what I was drinking, made a quiet joke about the violinist being slightly off-key, and never once mentioned money. He told me he was a financial advisor who'd gotten a last-minute invitation through a colleague. Said he had no idea who the Whitaker family really was. Looking back, that should have been the first warning sign. A financial advisor who doesn't research the host of one of Boston's biggest charity events? That's like a surgeon walking into the operating room and saying, "So, we're doing surgery today?" But I was tired of the obvious gold diggers. And here was this charming man asking about my favorite books, my go-to coffee order, the places I escaped to when the city got too loud. We talked for hours that night. He texted the next morning, still thinking about that terrible violinist. "Coffee sometime?" We dated for a year. Ethan was attentive in a way that felt almost too good to be true. He remembered the little things, that I hated roses because they reminded me of funerals, that I loved old jazz records on rainy Sundays. He insisted on paying for dinners even though I could have bought the restaurant twice over. He seemed genuine. My mother, Evelyn, saw through him the very first time they met. After dinner one night, she pulled me aside in the kitchen. "Amelia, that man's smile doesn't reach his eyes," she said quietly. "There's something off about him. I can feel it." I rolled my eyes, told her she was being overprotective, paranoid, maybe even a little jealous that I'd found someone who made me happy. We argued about Ethan constantly after that. Real arguments, raised voices, slammed doors, weeks of silence. Eventually, we stopped talking almost entirely. Birthday texts, holiday cards, nothing more. 2 years of distance between me and the woman who raised me. All because I chose to believe the man I loved over my own mother. Spoiler, she was right. And she never once said, "I told you so." Not even when she had every right to. Ethan proposed after a year of dating, on the back lawn of the Whitaker estate at sunset. down on one knee with my grandmother Charlotte's vintage ring that he'd asked my mother for, the one gesture that almost softened her toward him. The wedding was beautiful, held right here on the estate, under a tent draped in white lights. Ethan cried during his vows, tears rolling down his face as he promised to love and protect me for the rest of his life. I thought those were tears of joy. Turns out they were tears of relief. His long game was finally paying off. We tried for a baby for 2 years. Naturally, at first, when nothing happened, we saw a fertility specialist. The diagnosis was brutal. Ethan had severe male factor infertility. Almost no viable sperm. Natural conception was basically impossible. He broke down in the car afterward, cried for 20 minutes straight, kept apologizing like it was his fault our dreams were slipping away. I held him, told him we'd figure it out together. That's what marriage is for, right? What I didn't know then was that he wasn't crying from grief. He was crying because his plan had just gotten a whole lot more complicated. We decided on IVF with a special procedure called ICSI, where they take a single sperm and inject it directly into the egg. It was our best shot. Ethan threw himself into researching clinics. He said he wanted to take the burden off me because I was already so emotionally drained. He found one he swore was perfect, top success rates, discreet, compassionate staff. He handled all the paperwork, the appointments, everything. At the time, I thought it was sweet, supportive, the kind of partner every woman dreams of during something so hard. The first cycle failed. I was devastated, couldn't get out of bed for days. Ethan held me while I cried, whispered that we'd try again, that he'd never give up on our family. The second cycle, 7 months ago, worked. 2 pink lines on the test. I sobbed happy tears in the bathroom. Ethan wrapped his arms around me, already talking about nursery colors and names and the future we'd waited so long for. Then, almost casually, he mentioned that now that we were becoming a real family, maybe I should update my will. Just to be safe. Practical, he said, the responsible thing for new parents. I thought it was thoughtful. A sign he was thinking ahead for our baby. I had no idea he was already mentally spending my grandmother Charlotte's money. Everything felt perfect for a while. The loving husband, the baby growing inside me, the life I'd pictured since I was a little girl running through the gardens of the Whitaker estate. Then, around the 4-month mark, little things started shifting. At first they were so small I barely noticed. Or maybe I just didn't want to. Ethan started keeping his phone face down on tables. New password I didn't know. He'd step out onto the patio to take calls, come back inside saying it was a client, then change the subject fast. Late night calls at 11 p.m. on weekends. He'd say he was restructuring portfolios. That markets never sleep. I'm not a financial expert, but I'm pretty sure Wall Street closes on Saturdays. The late nights at the office multiplied 3-4 times a week, coming home after midnight. He's a financial advisor, not a trauma surgeon. What emergencies happen that often? I found receipts. An expensive downtown restaurant I'd never been to, dinner for 2. Almost $300. A hotel in the city, 40 minutes from our house. When I asked, the answers came smooth and quick. Client dinner, networking, conference ran late, easier to stay over. When I pressed harder, his tone shifted. Amelia, you're being paranoid. It's the hormones. My mother warned me pregnant women can get irrational. He made me feel crazy for even asking. I ended up apologizing to him. That's how good he was. Then the money conversations got more frequent, more urgent. We should add me to the trust. What if something happens during delivery? I need access for the baby's sake. Power of attorney. Just common sense for married couples. Your grandmother's house is too big anyway. We should sell it. I know exactly where to invest the proceeds for maximum growth. He wanted me to liquidate the Whitaker estate and hand him the money to manage. This from the man who couldn't remember which streaming service had his favorite show. I said no, gently at first, firmly after that. His warmth disappeared overnight, cold, distant, sleeping on the very edge of the bed, claiming my pregnant body took up too much space. He barely touched me anymore. Said he was afraid of hurting the baby. It sounded caring. It felt like rejection. When I tried to talk about it, he called me needy, hormonal, difficult. I started wondering if maybe he was right. If the problem was me. One night I woke up around 2 a.m. and he wasn't beside me. I found him in the kitchen, hunched over his phone, voice low. "It's almost time," he whispered. "By summer, everything will be settled." He saw me in the doorway and hung up immediately. Told me it was a work thing. "Go back to sleep, honey." I didn't ask who has work things at 2 in the morning about everything being settled by summer. I was too tired, too pregnant, too desperate to believe my marriage was still okay. A week later, my best friend Mia came over for lunch. She'd known me since college, seen me through every high and low. We sat at the kitchen island while I picked at a salad, making excuse after excuse for Ethan, the stress of impending fatherhood, the pressure at work, how hard the transition must be for him. Mia just listened, fork paused halfway to her mouth. Finally, she set it down and looked me straight in the eyes. "Amelia, when's the last time you actually talked to your mom?" I didn't answer. "And when's the last time Ethan was genuinely happy to see you walk through the door, not performing for company? Not putting on the devoted husband act, but really, truly happy?" I couldn't answer that either. She reached across the table and took my hand. "Trust your gut, honey, something's wrong here." I told her she was overreacting. But that night I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying everything, the phone always face down, the late nights, the sudden obsession with my money, the way he sometimes looked at me when he thought I wasn't watching. Like I was a puzzle to solve instead of a person to love. 4 months pregnant, routine ultrasound appointment. My regular OB was on vacation, so I was scheduled with her colleague, Dr. Lauren Hayes. I went alone. Ethan had a critical client meeting he couldn't reschedule. Standard stuff, cold gel on my belly, wand moving around, waiting for that magical moment when the baby dances on the screen. Dr. Hayes was warm, professional, made small talk about how I was feeling, if the baby was kicking yet. Then she opened my chart, glanced at the top page, and her face changed. She looked at Ethan's name, looked at me, back at the name. Her hands started to shake. She set the wand down, reached over, and turned the monitor completely off. "Mrs. Whitaker," she said, voice barely above a whisper. "I need to speak with you privately. Right now." My heart dropped. I thought something was horribly wrong with the baby. She walked me to her office, closed the door, and locked it. Then she sat across from me, took a deep breath, and said the words that cracked my world wide open. "I know what your husband did. And I have proof." She pulled a thick folder from her drawer, hand still trembling. "My younger sister Sarah works as a nurse at the fertility clinic you used, the one your husband chose. 3 weeks ago she came to me in the middle of the night, sobbing. She couldn't carry the guilt anymore. When I saw his name on your file today, I recognized it immediately." She opened the folder and laid it between us. "I'm so sorry, Amelia, but you need to see this before you go home. Before he knows that you know." And there, on crisp clinic letterhead, were documents that turned everything I thought I knew about my marriage, my pregnancy, and the man I loved into ashes. Dr. Hayes took a slow breath, like she was steadying herself before jumping into cold water. Her sister Sarah had shown up at her door 3 weeks earlier, close to midnight, barely able to speak through the tears. She hadn't slept properly in months. The guilt was eating her alive. 7 months ago, a patient's husband had approached Sarah at the clinic. Well-dressed, charming, calm. He told her he had a delicate situation that needed total discretion. His wife didn't know, but they were using donor sperm because of a genetic issue in his family he didn't want to pass on. Nothing sinister, just a husband protecting his wife from painful news. He offered her $30,000 cash to help switch the samples. $30,000 to a nurse drowning in student loans and credit card debt. Money that felt like a lifeline. Sarah helped. She swapped Ethan's sample, which couldn't have created a pregnancy anyway, with sperm from a paid donor. The embryologist was paid separately and told her the same story. Between the two of them, it went undetected. Then the pregnancy stuck. Sarah watched the records update, successful implantation. Somewhere out there was a woman carrying a baby she believed was biologically her husband's. And it wasn't. The guilt destroyed her. Panic attacks at work, calling in sick, staring at the ceiling at night wondering how she'd become part of something so wrong. Finally she broke and told her sister everything. I sat in that quiet office listening as Dr. Hayes laid it all out, piece by piece. Ethan hadn't just betrayed me with an affair or lies about money. He'd spent over $60,000 to deliberately set me up. $60,000 to bribe the clinic staff, pay a donor $15,000, far above normal rates, and make sure the paperwork could later be altered to show we'd conceived naturally after a failed IVF cycle. The plan was cold, calculated, and already in motion. After the baby was born, Ethan was going to suggest a sweet, sentimental DNA test, proof of our little family to frame in the nursery. When the results showed he wasn't the father, and the altered records suggested natural conception, he'd have everything he needed to paint me as the cheater. Our prenup, standard in families like mine, had an infidelity clause. If one spouse cheated, they paid the other $500,000 in penalties, forfeited any claim to separate property, and opened the door to additional emotional damage lawsuits. He'd walk away with at least $500,000, probably more, plus my reputation in ruins. And because I'd be so devastated, so ashamed, he was betting I wouldn't fight back hard enough to stop him. But there was more, so much more. Dr. Hayes slid another set of pages across the desk. Sarah had kept copies of everything: original lab records, donor ID, payment traces linked to accounts Ethan controlled, even emails with vague but incriminating language. The donor was Ryan Ellis, a 28-year-old grad student who'd answered an ad for private donation. Premium compensation. $15,000 sounded too good to be true. But rent and loans don't wait. He had no idea he was part of a fraud until later, and he was furious. And then the final piece. Dr. Hayes looked at me gently. My own research turned this up. I'm sorry. Ethan had $200,000 in gambling debt. Years of online poker, sports betting, secret casino weekends he'd passed off as conferences. The $60,000 he used for the bribes? Embezzled from his own clients, small amounts over months. Hidden in the books. His firm didn't know yet. He wasn't just greedy. He was desperate, drowning, and my grandmother's money was supposed to be his life raft, even if it meant destroying me to reach it. I stared at those papers for a long time. Shock hit first, cold and numbing, then disbelief. I kept rereading, searching for any mistake that would make it untrue. Then the pieces snapped together like a puzzle I'd been staring at blind. The accidental meeting at the gala. He'd known exactly who I was. The tears at our wedding, relief, not joy. My mother's warning I'd ignored for 2 years. I thought about screaming, about driving home and confronting him right then. But something else settled in its place. Something quiet, sharp, ice-cold calm. He thought I was naive, weak, that I'd crumble when his trap closed. He had no idea who he'd married. I looked at Dr. Hayes across the desk and asked the only question that mattered. Does he know that I know? She shook her head. No, Sarah hasn't told anyone else. And I only made the connection when I opened your file this morning. Good. I gathered the copies she'd made for me. Every page, every email, every record. My hand rested on my belly for a moment, feeling the baby shift like she already knew something big was coming. I need direct contact with Sarah, I said quietly, and I need you to make sure no one at that clinic touches those records until I say otherwise. Dr. Hayes nodded. What are you going to do? I stood up slowly, shoulders straight. Ethan thinks he's playing chess. He thinks he's 3 moves ahead. He thinks the game is already won. I looked her in the eye. He's about to learn I just flipped the entire board. I drove home that afternoon with the windows down, music playing softly, face completely calm. Ethan had installed security cameras around the house a couple of years ago, for safety. He'd said, now I wondered if they were also to watch me, to catch any flicker of suspicion. So I gave him nothing. He was waiting in the kitchen when I walked in, that easy smile ready. How was the appointment, sweetheart? Everything okay with our little one? I smiled back, walked straight into his arms, hugged him tight, and handed him the ultrasound printout Dr. Hayes had given me before everything shattered. Perfect, I said, voice warm and steady. Absolutely perfect. I deserved an Oscar for that performance. I cooked his favorite dinner that night, laughed at his stories, apologized for being so emotional lately, blamed the hormones, just like he'd blamed them on me for months. I watched his shoulders relax, the tension melt away. He thought his plan was still safe. He thought I was still blind. That night he slept deeply beside me, I lay awake until 3 a.m., staring at the ceiling, mapping out every step of his destruction. The next morning I called in sick to work. Then I drove 2 hours north to a town where no one knew us. I'd already researched her online. Laura Kane. Former detective. 15 years on the force before going private. Tough. No nonsense. The kind of woman who'd seen every lie a man could tell. I laid it all out for her. The clinic fraud. The prenup trap. The gambling. The embezzlement. I handed her the folder. She listened without interrupting. Took notes. And when I finished she gave a small, dangerous smile. Arrogant men always leave crumbs. She said, give me 10 days. She delivered in 9. The gambling debts were real, 200,000 across underground poker games, sports books, and private lenders who didn't send polite reminders. The embezzlement was confirmed, 63,000 siphoned from client accounts over 18 months. And then the affair, 8 months with his assistant, hotel receipts, intimate texts, photos that left nothing to imagination. Classic, painfully unoriginal. But Laura found something else. 5 years ago, in New York, Ethan had dated a woman named Elena Voss, heavy family money. Big trust. They were together 9 months before she discovered irregularities in a joint investment account he'd talked her into. She ended it quietly, too embarrassed to report him. Laura tracked her down. Elena was more than ready to talk now. The hardest thing I did was pick up the phone and call my mother. 2 years of silence. 2 years of me defending him. Shutting her out. Choosing a liar over the woman who'd raised me. The phone rang twice. Amelia? Her voice was cautious, but warm, like she'd been waiting. Mom, I said, and my voice cracked. You were right, about everything, and I'm so sorry. There was a long pause. I braced for anger, for the I told you so I deserved. Instead she just said, softly, what do you need, sweetheart? I cried harder than I had in years. My mother is a retired estate attorney, 30 years protecting families like ours. Within 48 hours she'd connected me with the best divorce lawyer in Massachusetts and a prosecutor who specialized in white-collar fraud. She never once reminded me of all the warnings I'd ignored. She just showed up. That's what real love does. With everything in place, I suggested to Ethan that we throw a big celebration, a baby shower and baby moon party combined, right here on the Whitaker estate. Both families, close friends, colleagues, a garden gathering under white tents to toast the little girl who was due in just a few months. His eyes lit up the moment I said it. More witnesses to his perfect husband performance. More people who'd feel sorry for the devastated father once his cheating wife was exposed. More sympathy to cash in on later. That sounds wonderful, he said, kissing my forehead like he used to when things were good. Let me help plan it. I smiled and patted his chest. You've been working so hard with all those late nights. Let me handle everything. You just show up and enjoy. He had no idea that my version of handling everything included plainclothes officers waiting in the guest cottage, my lawyer near the bar with a tablet full of documents, Sarah and Ryan Ellis ready to speak if needed, and folders of evidence organized and copied for anyone who wanted to see. The party was set for a Saturday in late spring. The Whitaker Gardens were in full bloom, roses my grandmother Charlotte had planted decades ago. Hydrangeas she added when my mother was born. Lavender borders I'd helped weed as a child. White tents on the back lawn. String quartet near the fountain. Champagne chilling. Flowers on every table. 60 guests in their Sunday best. Ethan's parents had driven up from Connecticut, beaming with pride over their successful son and his beautiful, pregnant wife. Ethan was in his element, handshakes, backslaps, that practiced laugh. His hand kept drifting to my belly for photos. The perfect soon-to-be dad. He was so convincing I almost felt bad for him. Almost. His mother kept tearing up, telling anyone who'd listen what a caring husband and wonderful father he'd be. His father puffed out his chest, proud of the Whitaker legacy supposedly continuing through their son. My mother stood quietly near the dessert table, watching Ethan with the calm patience of someone who already knew how the story ended. She caught my eye across the lawn and lifted her glass just a fraction. A silent, it's time. Around 3 o'clock, Ethan did exactly what I knew he would. He'd been dropping hints for weeks about wanting a sweet keepsake DNA test to frame in the nursery. Now, in front of everyone, He pulled me close and spoke loudly enough for the crowd to hear. You know what would be amazing? Sweetheart, let's do one of those at-home DNA kits. We can frame the results. Proof that daddy and baby girl are connected forever. Wouldn't that be special? Guests murmured, "Ah," and "how sweet." His mother dabbed her eyes again. I pretended to hesitate, shy. I don't know, seems like a lot of fuss. Come on, he pressed, grinning wide. We could even reveal the results right here today. Make it part of the celebration. What do you all think? More encouraging sounds from the crowd. He was glowing. The trap he'd spent over a year building was about to snap shut. He could practically feel my money in his hands. He just didn't realize whose neck was really in the noose. I excused myself, walked to the small platform we'd set up near the fountain for toasts, and picked up the microphone. Ethan smiled up at me, champagne in hand, already rehearsing his shocked and betrayed face. Thank you all for being here today. I began, my voice carrying clearly over the lawn. This party is meant to celebrate family and truth. I found his eyes in the crowd. My husband has been eager to reveal something special today, so I thought I'd help him do exactly that. His smile flickered. I reached under the podium and pulled out a thick folder. 3 months ago, I learned some things about my husband that changed everything I thought I knew about our marriage. The lawn went still. I want to share them with you now. Because Ethan is right. This should be about truth. Ethan's champagne glass froze halfway to his lips. I held up the first set of documents so everyone could see. These are the original records from the fertility clinic my husband personally selected for our IVF. I let the word original hang in the air. They show that Ethan paid 2 staff members, $30,000 to a nurse and more to the embryologist, to replace his sample with donor sperm without my knowledge or consent. Gasps rippled across the lawn. Someone's glass slipped and shattered on the stone patio. I gestured toward the edge of the crowd where Ryan Ellis stood quietly. This is Ryan, the grad student Ethan paid $15,000 to provide that sperm. Ryan thought he was helping a couple who needed privacy. He had no idea he was part of a crime. Ethan found his voice, high, panicked. Amelia, honey, this is insane. You're confused. It's the pregnancy hormones. You're not thinking straight. I'm not finished, I said, my voice steady and cold. The crowd went dead silent. In addition to orchestrating fraud at the clinic, my husband embezzled $63,000 from his clients to fund it. His firm has been notified and is cooperating with authorities. I looked toward Ethan's boss, who'd accepted my quiet invitation. He set his drink down slowly, face grim. Ethan also carries $200,000 in hidden gambling debt, money owed to people who don't send gentle reminders. Then I held up the photos, nothing graphic, just clear enough. Romantic dinners, hotel entrances, his assistant's hand in his. For the last 8 months, he's been having an affair. Ethan's mother made a sound like the air had been punched out of her. His father stared at the ground. And this isn't even the first time. I continued, 5 years ago in New York, he targeted another woman with family money. She's provided a full statement to investigators. Ethan's champagne finally slipped from his fingers and exploded across his shoes. Those are lies, he shouted, voice cracking. She's making it all up. She's unstable, the pregnancy has. His mother's quiet voice cut through. Ethan, is any of this true? He turned to her, mouth open. Nothing came out. Sarah stepped forward from near the guest cottage, pale but resolute. I'm the nurse he bribed. I have every record. I've already given my statement to police. Ryan spoke next. He paid me $15,000 and told me it was a private arrangement. I didn't know it was fraud until last month. Ethan's eyes darted wildly, colleagues, friends, family, all staring at him like he was a stranger. Then 2 officers walked calmly across the grass from the guest cottage. Ethan Whitaker, the first one said, voice professional and loud enough for everyone to hear. You're under arrest for fraud, conspiracy, and embezzlement. You have the right to remain silent? They cuffed him right there, in the middle of my grandmother's garden, under the roses she'd planted the year my mother was born. His mother was sobbing into her husband's shoulder. His father wouldn't look at him. As they led him toward the driveway, Ethan tried one last time, voice breaking, desperate. Amelia, please, we can fix this. I made mistakes, but I love you. Think about our baby. Think about our family. I stepped closer so he could hear me clearly. You're right, Ethan, we just fixed it. The police car pulled away down the long gravel drive, past the gardens Charlotte Whittaker had tended for 50 years, through the iron gates Ethan had dreamed of owning. 60 guests stood in stunned silence. My mother walked up beside me, slipped her arm around my shoulders, and whispered, I'm so proud of you. Sweetheart, Charlotte would be too. For the first time in months, I took a deep, full breath. Ethan was denied bail, flight risk, the judge said, with those gambling debts and the kind of people waiting for payment. No one believed he'd stick around for trial. His creditors got very loud, very quickly once the arrest hit the local news. They'd been patient while he had a wealthy wife. That patience vanished the second they realized the well had run dry. His assistant, the one he'd been sneaking around with for 8 months, resigned the very next morning. Didn't even clear her desk. Just emailed HR and disappeared. Loyalty apparently has an expiration date. His firm finished their internal audit in 2 weeks. $63,000 confirmed missing. They filed additional charges. The woman from New York, Elena Voss, came forward publicly once she saw the news. She'd spent years feeling foolish for letting him walk away clean. Not anymore. Her statement strengthened the prosecution's pattern of behavior argument. The divorce was over almost before it started. My lawyer, Sandra Kowalski, 5'2" with silver hair and the bite of a great white, reviewed every piece of evidence and smiled like Christmas had come early. The infidelity clause in our prenup? It now worked in my favor. He was the cheater. He owed penalties he'd never be able to pay. He had nothing left to give anyway. The criminal case moved fast. Sarah testified. The embryologist took a plea for reduced charges and told everything. Ryan provided his records. The paper trail was airtight. Fraud, conspiracy, embezzlement, every count stuck. His parents stopped attending court after the first week. His father released a short statement about choices no parent can defend. His mother checked into a wellness retreat, the polite term wealthy families use when reality becomes too much. Ethan Whittaker, who'd walked into my life 4 years earlier with such careful charm, would spend years behind bars. When he eventually walked out, he'd have no money, no career, no reputation, just a criminal record that would follow him forever. The trap he'd built so patiently snapped shut on him instead. My daughter was born 4 months after the party. Healthy, perfect, 8 pounds, 2 ounces of pure light. Some people asked if I'd reach out to Ryan Ellis. Let him know, maybe include him somehow. I thought about it, but Ryan was 28, finishing his PhD, not looking to be a father. And I didn't need him to be. My little girl would have me. She'd have her grandmother Evelyn, finally back where she belonged. She'd have the whole Whittaker legacy of strong women who'd lived and loved in that house for generations. That was more than enough. Family isn't DNA. It isn't a test result or a bloodline on paper. Family is who shows up, who stays, who chooses you every single day, especially when it's hard. My mother chose me when I didn't deserve it. I chose my daughter, no matter how complicated the story of her beginning. That's what family really means. Mom and I have lunch every week now. We're slowly stitching back the years we lost, one conversation, one shared memory at a time. She's never once said, I told you so. One day I finally asked why. She set her coffee down, smiled softly, and said, because watching you bring that man down with grace and steel was 1,000 times more satisfying than any 4 words could ever be. I laughed, the first real, deep laugh in longer than I could remember. A few weeks after my daughter's birth, I sat in Grandmother Charlotte's kitchen, my kitchen now, with morning light pouring through the same windows that had watched 4 generations of Whittaker women start their days. I made chamomile tea the way she taught me, her favorite blend. Some traditions are worth keeping. My phone buzzed, a text from Mom. Lunch tomorrow? I smiled and typed back, always. Outside, the gardens were blooming again. Roses Charlotte planted as a young bride. Hydrangeas for my mother's birth. Lavender I'd helped set into the soil when I was 10. Small hands patting dirt while she told me stories about the women who came before us. I rested my hand on my belly, still soft, still adjusting, and felt my daughter kick in her bassinet nearby. Ethan Whittaker had tried to take everything from me. My money, my home, my peace, my future. All he really did was show me how unbreakable I'd always been. Grandmother Charlotte used to say, Whitaker women don't break, we bend, we adapt, we rise from whatever ashes life leaves us with, and we build something even stronger. Ethan thought he'd married an easy mark. He married a Whitaker. And now he has years in a prison cell to think about that mistake. Thank you for listening to my story. If it touched you, helped you, or just kept you company for a little while, I'm grateful. If you're enjoying these stories, please hit subscribe. I read every comment, and they truly mean the world to me. See you in the next one.